Every empire had a currency. Every currency had a collapse. The dollar's time ... is almost up. For 80 years, the global financial system has operated under one simple, inviolable rule. The US dollar is supreme. It is the lifeblood of global trade, the reserve currency of the world, and the bedrock of American power. But that power was never a birthright. It was a deal. And now, the rest of the world is preparing to tear that deal up. Across the globe, quietly, a new alliance is forming. BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa now expanding to include major oil producers and economic heavyweights. Their goal is not merely political, it is financial. They plan to dismantle the dollar's dominance, brick by brick. The U.S. has spent decades using its currency as a weapon. Now, that weapon is turning on its creator. The next global empire is already forming in the East, and they are preparing to unleash a currency war. This is the ultimate threat to the American century. Here's what should terrify you. It's not a missile that will bring the dollar down. It's an invoice. And this time, the pattern is happening again. To understand the threat, we must first look at the moment the dollar's power was born. The year was 1944. The world was shattered by war, and, at Bretton Woods, the United States made a promise. Every dollar was convertible to gold at a fixed price. This solidified the dollar's position as the world's reserve currency, replacing the British pound sterling, which had been exhausted by 2 world wars. But the real magic trick, the modern magic trick, didn't happen until the 1970s. After President Nixon severed the dollar's link to gold in 1971, the dollar became fiat money, backed by nothing but faith and military might. The dollar was dying. Then, a strategic masterstroke, the Petrodollar system. In exchange for U.S. military protection, Saudi Arabia and later, nearly all OPEC nations agreed to sell their oil exclusively in U.S. dollars and recycle the profits back into U.S. Treasury bonds. This single agreement forced every nation needing oil, which is every nation, to constantly hold U.S. dollars. The Petrodollar and the SWIFT payment system are the twin pillars of American financial hegemony. They allow the U.S. to borrow cheaply, print money recklessly, and exert unparalleled political pressure through sanctions. But all systems decay. And, like the British Empire before it, this structure is showing cracks. The question isn't if the dollar will fall, but when it enters the terminal stage. Let's see how this same pattern played out in history and where we are in the sequence. Before the dollar, there was the pound sterling. For over a century, the British pound was the engine of the global economy. Backed by the largest empire the world had ever seen, the power was absolute. But great power demands perpetual expense. The turning point was not a battle, but a balance sheet. 2 world wars had bled Britain dry, forcing it to liquidate assets and amass crippling debt, much of it owed to the emerging power across the Atlantic. The mistake was financial overreach combined with military necessity. By the time the global financial architects met at Bretton Woods in 1944, the decision was already made. The vaults in London, once repositories of global wealth, felt hollow. Britain, financially exhausted, was forced to sign over its financial sovereignty. The gold was shipped across the Atlantic, and the mighty pound sterling became just another currency, paving the way for the U.S. dollar to take the throne. The global currency shift was sudden, inevitable, and finalized in a single, quiet agreement. When Nixon closed the gold window in '71, the dollar was a kite cut from its string. It needed a new anchor. Enter Henry Kissinger. The strategic decision was to replace gold with a commodity the world couldn't live without: oil. A pact was struck with the House of Saud around 1974. The deal was simple. The U.S. guarantees the security of the Saudi regime. In return, Saudi Arabia agrees to price all its oil sales exclusively in U.S. dollars. And crucially, invest the massive surplus of those petrodollars back into U.S. Treasury bonds. This decision created a perpetual artificial demand for the U.S. dollar. Every nation needing oil had to acquire dollars first. This mechanism provided the U.S. with an exorbitant privilege, the ability to print the world's reserve asset, finance its deficits, and export its inflation. The dollar's reign was not an economic miracle, it was a geopolitical weapon forged in the desert. Both the British pound and the early post-gold dollar were undone by the same flaw, arrogance born of security. They believed their system was permanent. And they all made the same mistake. The mistake of weaponization. The U.S. decision in 2022 to freeze the foreign currency reserves of a G20 economy sent a chill across the rest of the world. It showed that the global financial system was not a neutral utility. It was a tool of foreign policy, capable of instantly crippling any adversary. This single decision was the starting pistol for the ultimate pushback. It was the moment the world began to truly look for the exit. History confirms that every imperial currency follows the same 5 stages of decline. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. Stage 1. Overextension and complacency. Power feels permanent. The dominant empire expands its military and financial commitments globally, incurring unsustainable debt to police the world and provide for its citizens. This debt is serviced easily because the empire prints the world's currency. Stage 2. Financial overreach. The state relies on borrowing to maintain its status. Fiscal discipline collapses. Spending explodes beyond all sustainable limits, creating a massive supply of currency dollars that floods the global market, causing inflation at home and abroad. Stage 3. Weaponization. The currency is used as a tool of political control, often through sanctions and reserve freezing. This is the moment the world recognizes the system is not safe, and the host nation has forfeited its neutral stewardship. Stage 4. The pushback. A coalition of nations begins actively seeking alternatives. They sign bilateral trade agreements in local currencies, increase their gold reserves, and develop parallel payment infrastructure to bypass the dominant system SWIFT. The BRICS expansion is the clearest historical example of this stage. Stage 5. The alternative emerges. A viable competing standard or mechanism is introduced and adopted by a critical mass of trade partners. This could be a commodity-backed currency, a basket of currencies, or a successful non-SWIFT payment network. Once this system handles a significant fraction of global trade, the petrodollar mechanism is broken. And right now, we've already completed 4 of them. Let's hold the mirror to the present day. Stage 1. Overextension. Check. The U.S. maintains 750 foreign military bases and has engaged in 2 decades of costly military interventions. The bill is over $33 trillion in national debt, a figure that grows by the second. Power is expensive, and the dollar is paying for it with its stability. Stage 2. Financial overreach. Check. The U.S. Federal Reserve's balance sheet has exploded, and chronic systemic deficits are now the default setting, not the exception. The world is awash in dollars, leading to relentless inflation that undermines the purchasing power of every central bank holding U.S. reserves. Stage 3. Weaponization. Check. The freezing of Russia's central bank assets was the shot that changed everything. It communicated a clear, chilling message. If you don't agree with U.S. foreign policy, your money is not safe. It instantly accelerated the agenda of every nation wary of American power, from Saudi Arabia to China. Stage 4. The pushback. Check. This is the phase we are in right now, spearheaded by the expanded BRICS Plus alliance. Look at the evidence. Bilateral trade between Russia and India. Over 80% is now settled in rubles and rupees, not dollars. China is using the yuan for oil purchases with Russia and signing massive contracts with Middle Eastern nations that hint at yuan settlement. The BRICS group now represents over 40% of the world's population and roughly a quarter of global GDP. Their agenda is explicit: a reserve currency or a trade mechanism backed by commodities, perhaps gold. Perhaps a basket of major currencies specifically designed to bypass the dollar. This is the mirror moment when history repeats itself. Just as the British Empire's debt paved the way for the dollar, U.S. debt and sanctions are now creating the conditions for the BRICS alternative. We are building tension. We are teetering on the edge of stage 5s. The alternative emerges. What happens when the petrodollar deal finally breaks? When a major oil producer, Saudi Arabia, for example, formally agrees to sell oil in a basket of currencies, or a BRICS coin, the sudden drop in global demand for the dollar would be catastrophic. The hundreds of billions of dollars currently held by foreign banks and governments would flood back into the U.S. economy, fueling unstoppable hyperinflation. The U.S. government would be forced to service its debt not with cheap printed dollars, but with money the world no longer trusts. Interest rates would skyrocket. The ability of the U.S. to fund its military, its social programs, and its deficits would vanish almost overnight. The standard of living for every single American would rapidly decline. Goods imported from overseas would become ruinously expensive. The geopolitical stability the U.S. has enjoyed for decades, funded by the world's willingness to hold its currency, would dissolve. When empires fall, it's never slow. It's sudden, brutal, final. The coming currency war will not be televised. It will be felt in your supermarket, your mortgage payment, and your emptying bank account. Maybe this time will change. But history says otherwise. The reign of a currency is not a divine right. It is a temporary privilege, negotiated by geopolitics and maintained by stability. Just like the mighty pound sterling, the dollar's destiny is defined by those who hold it. And once they lose faith, once they find an exit, the shift is instantaneous. The world is not ending. It's just reorganizing. And if you understand the pattern, you can prepare for the collapse. The question is, are you watching close enough? Like and subscribe for more deep dives into the mechanics of history and the future of finance. We'll see you in the next Rewind.